Everything around you was screaming to give up, but you silenced those voices with a whisper of faith. I heard thunder through heaven. You didn't need comfort to continue. You needed conviction, and you held on to it like it was your last breath. The pressure wasn't ordinary. It was the kind designed to break even the strongest, but you, my chosen one, stood inside that pressure and didn't fold. You cried, but you didn't walk away. You trembled, but you stayed rooted. You had every excuse to leave the battlefield, but something deeper than logic kept you there. That was me. I was inside your hesitation, urging your spirit forward when your flesh wanted relief. What most don't know is that this moment wasn't just another hard day. It was a divine examination dressed in chaos. And you passed it with a heart that refused to harden. I know you've been watching others thrive while you barely survive, but let me tell you what I saw from the throne. I saw a soul that refused to be defined by delay, a warrior who stared back at hell with eyes full of heaven. I saw you hold your ground when everything you built looked like it was crumbling. That decision, to stay, to endure, to believe, unlocked realms others will never see. You didn't just pass a test today, you exposed a hidden faith that few ever reach. You chose me without seeing reward. You followed my steps when the path was invisible. That's why this moment is sacred, because rare are those who reach this dimension of obedience. Child, you broke through a ceiling that generations before you never shattered, and now I must open doors that don't respond to talent or strategy, but only to tested faith. This is where I separate the ordinary from the rare, the called from the chosen, the visible from the anointed. What's coming next is not a result of your strength but your surrender. You didn't make this happen. You allowed me to complete something through your stillness, your perseverance, your decision to walk when it made more sense to crawl. Others may never understand what you endured in silence, but I've carved this moment into the scroll of your destiny. This wasn't about pain. This was about proving. I wasn't testing your ability. I was verifying your readiness. Because, child, the next thing I do through you will shake the ones who doubted, will humble the ones who underestimated, and will elevate the ones who kept me first when everything felt last. I'm not just giving you breakthrough. I'm releasing a confirmation that the delay had a design, the warfare had a reason, and the silence had strategy. What's arriving now is not random. It's directly tied to the moment you did quit. You crossed the line others will never even see because they bowed to comfort while you bowed to me. And now, because you crossed it, you've entered a territory where only rare few stand, and I'm about to let the world witness what I do for the ones who didn't walk away when they had every reason to. You bore what others would have shattered beneath, and not once did you trade your belief for bitterness. Even when no one asked how you were holding up, even when the weight in your chest felt heavier than the air around you, you still lifted your eyes to me. You moved through your day with questions pressing against your ribcage, but you didn't let them drown out the echo of my promises. The strength it took to remain kind, gentle, and pure while your insides screamed for release, that was not unnoticed. You kept praying, not because everything felt right, but because you knew I was still worthy even when the answers were missing. You walked past judgment, betrayal, and silent battles, not one of which was visible to the world, and yet you treated the broken ones around you with gentleness. You didn't let disappointment steal your devotion. You didn't allow confusion to cancel your covenant. And that is what distinguishes you in the spiritual realm. Not your words, not your title, but your posture in pressure. You didn't publicize your battles. You didn't beg for pity. You brought every ache to me like a private offering. The raw places of your heart became altars, and I received them like fragrant worship. I saw you standing in the middle of unanswered prayers, surrounded by fears, and still you refused to let go of what I spoke. You could have surrendered to silence. You could have grown cold. But instead, you grew deeper, wider, stronger, hidden. What you survived wasn't random. It was spiritual resistance meant to abort your becoming. And still, you kept your hands open. Still, you served. Still, you trusted me in the dark. My child, You passed a pressure that most never survive. You didn't fold. You didn't fail. You flourished in secret. And now, I am calling that season to account. The quiet ache you never spoke about, I am answering it in public. The strength you used to forgive, I am returning in favor. The hours you spent in tears no one ever saw, I am redeeming with sudden, irreversible, divine reversals. Don't you see? You have entered a realm where few ever arrive. You chose faith when the pain should have shattered it. You walked forward when the ground beneath you cracked. You waited when everyone else rushed. And that decision, that painful but holy decision, has opened something irreversible. I didn't let others see what you went through because what I was building in you wasn't for display. It was for destiny. You weren't failing, you were being formed. You weren't ignored, you were being infused. And now, you are no longer where you were, even if your surroundings haven't changed. You've crossed into the rare. You've graduated into the trusted. And what I place in your hands next won't be small, won't be delayed, and won't be shared with those who only praise me when it's easy. Your silence in struggle became a sound in heaven louder than any shout. And now I'm responding. I'm responding not to your pain, but to your faith in the midst of pain. And I am releasing what has been held back, what has been waiting, what has been stored for the ones who pass the hidden trials. This isn't a reward. It's a recognition of who you became when no one was watching. You weren't just enduring life's hardship. You were testifying in a realm that weighs tears heavier than words. When you wept alone in your room, unsure why your spirit felt so heavy despite doing everything right, those tears weren't wasted. They were being gathered, catalogued, and presented before the judge who never sleeps. You didn't need to speak in that pain. Your silence was louder than thunder to me. The pain didn't mean punishment, it meant purpose. While you thought you were just surviving an emotional storm, you were unknowingly being examined by the unseen world. Angels stood still as they watched you whisper my name through cracked lips and swollen eyes. You didn't even know you were being observed, but every moment you chose me over despair sent a signal into realms beyond comprehension. The battle wasn't to break you, it was to verify your identity. And you passed. You were being sifted like wheat while you walked through everyday life. The enemy launched invisible assignments, hoping to prove you were all emotion with no anchor. But you kept claiming. Not perfectly, not loudly, but faithfully. And that's what changed everything. I don't measure performance like people do. I look for hearts that choose me when nothing makes sense. You didn't know you were in a proving ground. That's how subtle the test was. It wasn't about what you could say, it was about what you wouldn't let go. You held on to promises without knowing how they would be fulfilled. You held on to my presence even when I felt absent. That clinging, that refusal to let go, it tipped the scales in your favor. Child, what happened in those moments of private breaking was more powerful than 10,000 sermons. You didn't rehearse your faith. You lived it. Your desperation was not weakness, it was sacred. Your inner wrestle wasn't failure, it was a holy war between your old limitations and the new realm I was opening for you. And in that battle, every tear became a prophetic declaration. Each drop that fell from your eyes while no one noticed was weighed like gold before my throne. I saw your pillow become an altar. I saw your sighs become intercessions. What you called pain, I called proof. The kind of proof only rare souls ever offer. This test wasn't announced. It didn't come with warning signs. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, internal, invisible. The kind of testing that exposes your core. And yours was not hollowed, it was holy. You were faithful in places where others fainted. You were still in places where others screamed. You forgave when others cursed. You blessed when it would have been easier to break. And because of that, the verdict has shifted. You have not just passed, you have been declared trustworthy. That's not a term I give lightly. That is sacred territory. With trust comes access, and with access comes power, not the kind that inflates pride, but the kind that dismantles darkness. And now, what comes next isn't compensation, it's alignment. I'm bringing your external reality into harmony with your internal transformation. The pressure built a foundation that can now hold what's about to be placed on your life. Doors are moving. Systems are shifting. Not because you shouted, but because you stood. I am giving you influence that won't corrupt you. I am granting you visibility that won't change your heart. And all of this is being executed because you unknowingly testified through agony. My child, there is no need to fear what's ahead, because what you walk through in silence is louder than anything the future could throw at you. You've been seen. You've been weighed. And now, you've been validated by the courts of heaven. You didn't fight fire with fire. You let me fight for you. You could have defended yourself, explained your heart, retaliated with sharp words, but instead you turned the other cheek and gave me space to reveal truth in my own timing. That moment when you chose stillness over spite was not weakness. It was supernatural courage. You saw others prosper who compromised, who laughed at your purity, who twisted your silence into shame. But I saw your strength in choosing not to play their games. You held your ground without needing to be right in their eyes, because you were already justified in mine. It would have been easy to retaliate, to expose their lies, to clear your name with loud declarations, but you surrendered your reputation into my hands, and that made you dangerous in the spirit. When the world expects vengeance and you respond with humility, you don't just confuse the enemy, you crush the assignment that was meant to derail you. You walked through mockery with grace and left the offense on the floor like a weapon you refused to carry. And that choice, that holy restraint, became a sword in your hand sharper than anything they could throw at you. You chose peace when provoked, honor when humiliated, and that posture positioned you for an authority few can handle. Child, this wasn't about what they said, it was about who you became because of what they said. And you became unshakable. They thought their words would wound you, but instead they became the stones I used to build your foundation. I let them speak. I let them scoff. Because their cruelty revealed your calling. Their criticism revealed your clarity. Every insult carved out deeper space in your heart for my spirit to dwell. And now, you carry something untouchable. Not because you were spared from conflict, but because you were refined in it. You passed a test many fail, the test of surrender when slandered. You stood quiet when your name was dragged, and I wrote it in places your enemies will never access. I inscribed your character in the heavenlies while they joked about your silence. They saw timidity, but I saw restraint. They saw hesitation, but I saw mastery of the soul. You became royalty in the spirit not by climbing, but by bowing. I am not blind to the nights you wanted to scream but chose instead to whisper my name. I saw the shaking in your chest as you resisted the urge to clap back. I know the pain of being misunderstood. I lived it first. And now you share in my nature because you chose to reflect me rather than respond to them. This is where separation occurs, not in gifts, not in talent, but in the quiet places where flesh wants to lash out and the spirit chooses reverence. You are no longer among the crowd. You've been set apart. You didn't win by being louder. You overcame by being lower. And I will exalt what was overlooked. What was mocked will now be magnified. Not because you demanded it, but because you became the kind of vessel I can entrust with vindication. I will make your life echo with evidence, not to embarrass them, but to exalt the grace you carried when you had the chance to be bitter. This is how I reward those who don't retaliate. I elevate them in the sight of the very ones who counted them out. So do not fear the laughter, the whispers, the side glances. They are merely background noise to the symphony I am composing through your surrender. What's coming next doesn't require your voice, it requires your continuation. And because you never bowed to bitterness, I'm crowning you with something far greater than applause. I'm clothing you in glory. What you did in the drought became louder in eternity than any celebration performed in abundance. You raised your hands when your heart was trembling. You whispered songs when your voice cracked from disappointment. You praised, not because you saw miracles, but because you trusted the miracle maker. You built an altar in the absence of visible favor, and that altar was not missed by heaven. Many can sing when everything flows, when doors swing open, when answers flood in like rain. But only the rare few offer gratitude when the fields are barren and the skies remain still. You stood in empty rooms with tear-streaked cheeks and sang to me like I had already given you everything. That sound, that pure sound of surrender, carried more weight than multitudes shouting from mountaintops. You didn't wait for conditions to align with your expectations. You praised with broken expectations. You danced when your feet felt like stone. You declared my goodness not because you saw it but because you knew it, and that distinction shattered boundaries in the spiritual realm. You activated something that only gets triggered by raw, unfiltered, costly adoration. You gave me your yes when everything in your world whispered no. And child, that obedience pierced through realms no eye could see. That was not a performance. It was prophetic warfare. You sang to me when nothing made sense, and every word became a weapon against the atmosphere trying to break your spirit. You kept your eyes on me even when the fog refused to lift. You said, I will bless you anyway, and all of heaven stood still to witness the beauty of that decision. You walked into rooms full of silence and chose to fill them with sound that honored me. And in doing so, you proved that your praise was never a transaction. It was a covenant. You didn't worship to get something. You worshiped because you belonged to me. That level of devotion wrote chapters in your story. It realigned things you didn't even realize were misaligned. I moved angels into position because your worship invited me in. The waiting room became a sanctuary. The emptiness became a holy ground. You didn't see movement outside, but inside you were ascending. You rose above your environment. You stepped over despair. You sang louder than your fears. You trusted my name more than your timeline. And now, child, because of that offering, that unseen, uncelebrated, unforced worship, I am releasing something no crowd could ever grant you. What's coming will not be shallow. It will not be temporary. It will not be manufactured. It will be birthed from the very intimacy you forged in the fire. Others waited for a word before lifting their voices. You made worship your lifestyle, not your strategy. That's why you will see things they won't. You will access places they don't. You will hold peace they cannot imitate. Because what you built in the quiet has created a fortress the enemy cannot penetrate. I do not forget what is done in secret, and I do not overlook what is given in drought. You didn't need applause, you needed me. And I was there, receiving it all, collecting every sound, sealing every declaration. You changed the atmosphere in rooms where despair was planted. You turned sorrow into incense. You took loss and transformed it into reverence. And now I am responding, not with mere things, but with encounters, with clarity, with authority. What I'm unlocking has been waiting for a heart like yours, one that doesn't treat me as a vending machine, but as the source of life itself. You didn't wait for a sign to start singing. You became the sign. You became the sound. You became the offering. And I am moving on your behalf because you gave me glory before the blessing arrived. I watched when the winds howled against your progress, when darkness wrapped itself around your path and clarity seemed like a distant dream, yet you remained alert while others slumbered under the illusion of ease. While many chose comfort over calling, you refused to numb yourself with distraction. You stayed present, fully aware of the warfare unfolding around you. You didn't close your eyes and hope for the storm to pass. You stood watch, praying through each gust, interceding while thunder tried to shake your confidence. What you did in that hour of heaviness became a monument before me. I took note when you whispered my name instead of drowning in despair. Others turned to temporary shelter. You turned to eternal covering. They lay down hoping it would all go away. You stood up, believing I would make a way. You weren't just enduring. You were contending. You held your position with trembling hands, knowing that breakthrough would only be born through spiritual perseverance. That posture, that decision to stay awake while the world curled inward, changed your destiny. You fought battles no one saw, and prevailed because you refused to surrender to fatigue. Yes, I saw the moments you could have chosen numbness, when escape was a more appealing option than endurance. But you didn't disconnect. You pressed in. You asked me to teach you while the storm raged, and I did. I taught you how to see through fog. I trained your ears to hear through thunder. I refined your discernment in turbulence so that peace would no longer depend on silence. What you gained during those sleepless nights wasn't just survival. It was sight. You now perceive what others miss because you chose attentiveness over ease. You didn't let the storm steal your attention. You focused anyway. You kept praying when the atmosphere resisted your words. That faith, that grit, that unwavering posture, it became the key to doors locked by spiritual forces for generations. You awakened something powerful by refusing to drift off into complacency. I saw your shoulders shake with exhaustion, but still you held on. I saw you choose watchfulness when no one required it. A choice birthed access to things that can't be bought, earned or mimicked. Now the skies are beginning to shift. The heavens that look heavy are preparing to pour down recompense. I'm responding to your refusal to sleep through your assignment. Because you didn't abandon your post, I'm sending reinforcements to the very place you felt most exposed. Because you stayed alert, I'm releasing angelic activity in your atmosphere that will dismantle what tried to delay you. You were not being punished, you were being positioned. And your alertness became an invitation for heaven's involvement. You stayed awake when dreams were tempting, and now I will pour out realities that exceed what you could have imagined. Child, the storm wasn't the enemy, it was a classroom. You didn't just pass through it, you graduated within it. You're not leaving empty-handed. You're stepping out with spiritual weapons sharpened in midnight silence. Others will wonder how you discerned so clearly, how you remained so anchored, how you stepped out so precisely, and they won't understand that it came from the nights you stayed awake while they slumbered. You saw what others didn't because you paid attention when no one else thought it mattered. And now I will make it matter. I will show you why that vigilance was vital. I will reward you not just with answers, but with appointments, divine alignments, sudden visitations, supernatural timing. All of it converging now because you remained engaged. A watchman never sleeps, and you chose to wear that mantle in obscurity. Now, I will cloak you with favor in visibility. You will not have to fight to be seen. You will be placed where you are needed, not just wanted. This is the outcome of your decision to remain awake. The storm didn't end your story. It unlocked the chapter where my glory begins. I saw you standing in the thick of uncertainty, surrounded by silence so loud it nearly drowned your heartbeat, yet your hands remained lifted, your posture unshaken. This was never about winning by worldly standards. This was about what you would do when it felt like heaven withheld its voice. And you passed not by proving anything but by yielding everything. I wasn't watching your outcomes, I was watching your heart. I allowed the answers to delay, not to deny you, but to reveal how deep your faith truly runs when outcomes are unclear. While others chase visible progress, you anchored yourself in invisible promises. You trusted me when the prayers echoed back with no reply. You leaned in when my hands seemed hidden. You believed I was working, even when the evidence disappeared. That kind of loyalty cannot be manufactured. It's forged through fire and built in seasons where you feel blind but walk forward anyway. You proved your allegiance not through declarations, but through daily decisions to keep choosing me over the need for constant reassurance. That pleases me more than you know. The silence wasn't punishment, it was preparation. I was letting your faith mature. I was showing the atmosphere that your obedience isn't conditional. You trusted I was good even when I did explain myself. You didn't demand constant signs. You let my past faithfulness guide your present walk. You didn't question every delay. Instead, you surrendered to my timeline. And that surrender became a signal to the realm of darkness that your foundation is built on something unshakable. You could have filled the silence with fear, but you filled it with worship. You could have rushed ahead, but you waited with dignity. You weren't motionless, you were rooted. And there's a difference. Rooted souls bear fruit long before it becomes visible. While others chased shortcuts, you stayed in covenant. You weren't driven by performance. You were sustained by presence. That quiet endurance, that subtle strength, that unseen loyalty, it qualified you for elevation. And now I'm opening what silence was preserving. What I've been building behind the scenes is about to be revealed. Not because you earned it, but because you trusted me with it. You gave me your hopes without demanding a blueprint. You handed me your plans without attaching deadlines. You remained steady when the ground beneath you shifted. That's why the gates are responding now, because you proved you can be trusted with what others would manipulate. I didn't need you to perform for me. I needed you to stay with me. And you did. That decision has shifted the spiritual climate around your name. Your identity has been recognized by heaven's court as trustworthy. And that identity is what draws resources, relationships, and repositioning. What others chased externally is now being magnetized to your life because of what you cultivated internally. Your silence was not wasted. It was your agreement. You agreed to let me lead, even without full understanding. That is rare. That is holy. That is why this door won't resemble anything you've seen before. I had to hold it back until you stopped needing to see the way. Now you will walk into what requires no striving. Now you will carry what doesn't collapse under pressure. Now you will flow in what cannot be counterfeited. You didn't pass because everything worked out. You passed because you didn't walk out. And I am honoring that now. I'm calling the winds to shift in your direction. I'm summoning outcomes that waited for your maturity. I'm commanding timelines to bend around my appointed season for you. This is the fruit of trust. Not rush results. Not manipulated outcomes. But a divine unfolding that only those who've waited in the silence can steward. So do not mistake stillness for stagnation. You have moved more in faith than many who ran ahead in fear. And now, I'm placing something in your hands that doesn't just answer the silence. It proves that I was in it the whole time. You did wait for a full explanation before moving your feet. You responded to my nudge, not knowing what it would cost or where it would lead. That simple yes, uttered from a place of raw faith and not full comprehension, carried more authority in the spirit than all the plans you could have drafted on your own. When others needed clarity before movement, you gave me availability without bargaining. You trusted that I knew what you couldn't see, and because of that, you stepped into a realm where surrender matters more than certainty. That obedience, blind to the details but fully lit by trust, was seen by angels, recorded in heaven, and honored before the throne. You didn't have a map. You had a word. And you followed it without conditions. When others required signs to step forward, you moved with me even when the ground was invisible. That kind of submission cannot be taught. It's revealed in hearts that are already yielded. You didn't say yes to be seen. You said yes because you couldn't deny my pull on your soul. That whisper of willingness unlocked dimensions that only open through obedience. You chose divine direction over personal understanding, and that decision sealed a breakthrough that's now reaching maturity. You could have hesitated. You could have waited for assurance. But instead, you leaned into me with nothing but faith. That moment shifted your atmosphere. What seemed like a small step was a massive leap in the supernatural. I measured your willingness, not your wisdom. I looked for your agreement, not your argument. And you gave me the answer I long to hear from my children. Have your way, Lord, even if I don't know what you're doing. That response shook foundations. It disarmed opposition. It unlocked instructions reserved for those I can trust beyond their understanding. You gave me room to be Lord without demanding the blueprint. That's rare. That's holy. That's what I'm promoting in this hour. Those who follow me in shadows, who don't require applause, who don't delay obedience while they debate. You stepped even when your knees trembled. You followed when your heart was unsure. You let me guide the process without demanding to preview the promise. And that is why I'm releasing clarity, acceleration, and access. Not because you had perfect faith, but because you had willing faith. You moved without delay, and that movement signaled to heaven that you were ready for what delay was protecting. Now the curtain is lifting. You're about to see why I couldn't show you the whole picture then. Your yes made you eligible to carry what others disqualified themselves from by refusing to move without control. I don't use the most talented. I use the most yielded. And child, your yielding was loud in heaven. You said yes without schedule, without comfort, without recognition. And now that yes has drawn favor that cannot be replicated or reasoned away. I saw you make room for me when you didn't understand what I was asking for. And I filled that room with my presence. What you thought with loves was really positioning. What looked like surrender was actually upgrade. Your life will now begin to reflect the weight of that yes. The doors you are about to walk through will not make sense to onlookers, but they will be confirmation to your spirit. Because I only elevate those who obey before they see. I only increase those who bow before they build. And you, my precious one, said yes when everything around you was begging for you to wait. That obedience has drawn acceleration. That posture has commanded attention in rooms your name hasn't even reached yet. Prepare, for what is coming is not a reward. It is a mantle, a fresh assignment, a divine unlocking. And it all began the moment you whispered that sacred agreement. Yes, Lord. Even now, even without knowing why. You could have cried out for escape, begged for quick deliverance, pleaded for a way around the heat, but you didn't. You didn't look for an exit. You looked for my eyes. In the middle of what tried to consume you, you chose to remain inside the trial if it meant I would remain beside you. That request shifted everything. You weren't searching for relief. You were yearning for closeness. While others demanded that I take the pain away, you invited me deeper into it. And choice didn't remove the pressure, but it ignited transformation. You didn't run from the heat. You leaned into the purifying blaze. And though your flesh trembled, your spirit was strengthened. I did extinguish the flames because your request wasn't for ease. It was for intimacy. And I always honor the heart that wants me more than comfort. You gave me your shattered pieces and told me to make them into something holy. That submission, that reverence, that inner cry for my nearness, it created an environment for miracles. Not the external kind the world always seeks, but the inward kind that changes who you are at the core. You weren't looking for a shortcut through suffering. You wanted my presence to shape you in it. And so I did. I didn't pull you out. I came in. I stood with you while the fire surrounded. I whispered while everything else shouted. You did to avoid the heat. You became stronger in it. Every moment you chose me over panic was a moment your identity was being molded. I was burning off the layers that couldn't carry where I'm taking you. I wasn't being cruel. I was being thorough. You asked for refinement, and the fire obeyed. But not to harm you, to unveil you. The flame didn't destroy your destiny, it exposed it. And I watched as you walked forward even when the atmosphere threatened to crush you. You never realized how powerful that decision was. The ones who make it out of the furnace with me don't look like what they've endured. They shine brighter. They carry oil that costs something. They speak with weight that silence for you. And that is what I'm revealing in you. The residue of the flame is not defeat. It's authority. The smoke that clung to others will not remain on you, because your pursuit wasn't deliverance. It was dwelling. You didn't worship me to escape. You worshipped me to encounter. And that longing is why you now carry what can't be imitated. You passed through what others avoided. You endured what many abandoned. You clung to me when answers were absent. You found me in the fire, and now the fire has no claim on you. You didn't just survive. You were sanctified. The pressure didn't steal your praise, it deepened it. The fire didn't silence your worship, it refined its sound. The storm didn't shake your roots, it revealed how deeply you were anchored. And now, child, you are walking into a realm that only fire-forged ones can inhabit. You will stand before rooms that would have crushed you in a previous season, but now they will recognize the authority you wear. Not because of your strength, but because of what you chose in the crying. You didn't run. You didn't curse the process. You didn't trade your soul for temporary relief. You stayed, and you trusted. That trust has created a fragrance in the spirit that cannot be replicated through performance. It came through surrender, through stillness, through the request that moved my heart more than any other. Don't remove the fire, just remain with me in it. And I did. And now the fire is bowing to the one it tried to break. The test is ending, but the glory is just beginning. You weren't frustrated when opportunities dissolved. You leaned closer to discern what I was protecting you from. When certain paths were suddenly blocked, you didn't crumble or accuse me of abandoning you. Instead, you paused, turned your ear, and listened for the whisper most never wait to hear. That's how I knew. You weren't chasing outcomes, you were following me. You didn't define my movement by open gateways. You recognized that not every barrier is the enemy's doing. You understood that when I rout, it's never rejection, it's redirection. And you honored my sovereignty, even when it contradicted your preferences. I saw you standing before locked doors, not banging in desperation, but bowing in reverence. You didn't demand I open what I had already closed. You trusted that my no was filled with the same love as my yes. That posture, that quiet submission, shattered traps the enemy set ahead of you. You averted disasters you never knew existed because you didn't force your way through places I withheld. Others would have mistaken the silence for denial, but you sensed it was a shift. You didn't panic when the plan changed. You recalibrated your spirit instead of reacting in haste. You said, "Speak, Lord," while others shout, "And why, Lord?" And because of that response, I began revealing what was hidden beneath the surface. You weren't blind. You were being led. You weren't being punished. You were being shielded. What looked like delay was actually me preserving what's sacred. And you didn't just accept it. You thanked me for it. That level of discernment can't be taught. It is the fruit of intimacy. You recognized my hand even when it moved differently than you hoped. It's how I know you don't just love my blessings. You love me. That distinction is everything. I watched as you released what felt right in order to embrace what I revealed. I saw your spirit bow when your flesh wanted to rage. You turned detours into devotion. You transformed disruption into deeper trust. And in doing so, you unlocked insights that only the obedient ever access. You no longer need clarity to have confidence. You no longer need affirmation to keep moving. You've learned to be led, not just inspired. And that shift, that maturity, is why I'm about to unveil what I've been hiding until you reach this point. What others called disappointment, you interpreted as instruction. You didn't mourn the door, you pursued the direction. That flexibility of spirit is rare in this age of control. You didn't try to resurrect what I had buried. You let it rest, even when it felt like loss. That's how I knew I could trust you with elevation. Because what's ahead of you requires the ability to see beyond appearances. To walk forward without every detail mapped out. To follow a whisper while others need a spotlight. You are that one. You're no longer guessing, you're perceiving. You're no longer wandering, you're aligning. And because you no longer need everything to be obvious, I'm about to lead you through places so sacred they're veiled until the moment your feet arrive. I'm guiding you to a space prepared for those who value my presence over preference. Doors that once didn't open were never for you. Not because you weren't enough, but because you're called to more than you imagined. What I withhold, I redeem. What I block, I reroute. And every time you yielded to my shift instead of resisting it, you were stepping into a precision that few ever walk in. Now, I'm handing you keys you didn't even know existed. Access granted not because you pushed, but because you listened. Because you walked away when I whispered not this. Because you waited when others ran. That kind of trust changes destinies. And yours is about to unfold in a way that will leave even your silent tears rejoicing. Not because every door opened, but because every step was led. You weren't performing for attention. You were walking in alignment with heaven's rhythm while no one was looking. Your obedience wasn't a show. It was a sacred decision, repeated in secret, reinforced in silence, and sustained by love. You didn't require affirmation to continue. You didn't pause to be validated before moving. While many waited to be acknowledged before surrendering, you laid your will down with no audience, no recognition, and no certainty except that I asked for it. And that's what separates you. You didn't obey because of results, you obeyed because of relationship. You followed not because it made sense to the world, but because it pleased me. That kind of obedience carries a weight that can't be imitated. When the noise was absent, and when eyes were nowhere to be found, you still did what I asked. And in doing so, you demonstrated a kind of loyalty the angels marvel at. I watched how you walked through decisions that cost you reputation. I saw you take paths that looked foolish to those who didn't hear what I whispered. And still, you never changed direction just to gain approval. You didn't adjust your steps for the crowd. You kept your eyes on me. That resolve, that purity of intent, became a fragrance rising in my courts. You didn't need confirmation from people. You had conviction from the Spirit. And that's why I'm about to place you in spaces where no one will understand how you got there. Because what you did in hiddenness has made you ready for visibility. Not the kind the world chases, but the kind I assign. The kind that carries purpose, responsibility, and eternal consequence. When others were strategizing for applause, you were building altars. When they craved attention, you crave a direction. You wanted my will more than their approval. And now, what was planted in solitude is rising in strength. You didn't chase a platform. You carried a cross. You didn't promote yourself. You poured yourself out. You didn't announce every move. You waited for my timing. A humility was seen. That quiet fire you've walked with didn't go unnoticed. I measured your obedience not by how loud it was, but by how costly it became when no one clapped. You said yes when it brought no celebration. You said yes when it made you look strange. You said yes when others walked away. And each time, you grew more dangerous to darkness. Because you became a vessel that doesn't require attention to move in power. You learned to serve without being seen. You learned to give without expecting gratitude. You learned to move at my word without asking who was watching. And now, that unshakable posture has positioned you for something few can carry. What I'm about to release through you isn't the reward of popularity. It's the result of pure surrender. You kept going when there was no applause. You gave me your yes with no spotlight. And now I'm calling forth what's been maturing in the dark. The world will call it sudden. But we both know it was planted long ago, in moments when your obedience cost you comfort, connection, and clarity. You never obeyed for applause, which is why what's coming won't be able to be stolen by public opinion. I'm building something in you that cannot be reversed by criticism or rejection. Because it was born in stillness, it will stand in storm. Because it was birthed in submission, it will endure beyond trends. Child, I've seen every unnoticed step, every quiet choice, every invisible sacrifice. And I'm repaying not with noise but with weight. The weight of glory, the weight of assignment, the weight of impact. So prepare. I'm about to elevate the ones who obeyed without applause, and you are one of them. I never asked you to be flawless. I invited you to remain faithful. And that's exactly what you did. You didn't hide your struggles behind a mask of religious performance. You brought them to me, again and again, raw and trembling. Every time you stumbled, you didn't run from me, you returned. That turning of your heart, that refusal to let failure define you, echoed louder in heaven than any accomplishment ever could. You believed I could still use you when shame said otherwise. You whispered I still trust you when condemnation tried to convince you it was too late. And child, that decision, that persistent return, has broken chains more powerful than you know. I watched you fall, not once but many times, and yet you never let go of me. You chose proximity over pride. You chose repentance over hiding. You let me see the mess and you trusted I would still call you mine. And I did. I always will. You were never being measured by your ability to stay spotless. You were being watched for how quickly you ran back into my arms. Each time the enemy whispered that you'd gone too far, you silenced him by simply drawing near again. You didn't earn righteousness, you receive it. You didn't present perfection, you offered surrender. That is the posture that pleases me. I don't anoint the ones who never miss a step. I empower those who keep walking even when their legs feel weak, even when the weight is heavy, even when their past screams at them to quit. You kept moving. You kept believing I was better than your brokenness. You refused to partner with the lie that your failures disqualified you. And that, my child, is why the enemy fears your persistence. You are dangerous not because you are spotless, but because you are relentless in choosing me. That kind of consistency cannot be faked. It cannot be learned from books or borrowed from others. It comes from deep places, places of pressure, of honesty, of wrestling. And you've lived there long enough to know that my love isn't shaken by your weakness. You've tested my grace and found it stronger than your sin. You've questioned whether I would still use you after all you faced. And now, I answer you with a resounding yes. I have not changed my mind. I have not canceled the promise. I have not revoked the assignment. Your faithfulness in failure qualified you in ways your success never could. I'm not impressed by outward performance. I'm moved by the heart that keeps coming back to me, even when it's bleeding. You have shown me that you're not chasing applause, approval, or perfection. You're chasing me. And that pursuit, even limping, is more precious than you realize. You didn't pretend to be strong. You let me strengthen you. You didn't hide the pain. You invited me into it. You let grace define your journey, not guilt. You allowed transformation to take time. You didn't skip the process, and that's why what I'm building in you now will last. Others will try to understand how I've elevated someone who's walked through so much, but they won't see the hours you laid at my feet in secret, weeping not because of loss, but because you didn't want to let go of me no matter what. That kind of love is rare. That kind of pursuit shifts atmospheres. You did pass because you never failed. You passed because you didn't quit in the failure. You didn't stay down. You stood back up, again and again, and you reached for me. Now I'm about to place something in your life that reflects not your strength, but your surrender. Because I can trust those who have walked through the valley and still call me good. And you, my beloved, have proven that your love is not conditional. It's rooted in reality, refined in trial, and resolved in the quiet choice to stay with me even when you had every reason to walk away. There was a moment when most would have cried out for instant escape, demanding the pressure to lift, the ache to vanish, the sorrow to retreat. But not you. You opened your soul not with complaints, but with a plea for meaning. You didn't ask for the storm to end. You asked for eyes to see what I was doing within it. That prayer shifted everything. Heaven stood still. Your pain wasn't a barrier, it became your altar. While others pleaded for the situation to disappear, you asked me to stay close and speak louder in the midst of it. That posture shook the invisible realm. You weren't chasing comfort, you were pursuing comprehension. You wanted my perspective more than you wanted relief. You didn't push away the pain. You invited me into it with holy curiosity, asking me to shape your heart through it. That sacred desire, to be refined, not rescued, distinguished you in the spirit realm. You became a student of suffering, not its prisoner. You chose revelation over escape. You searched for treasures beneath the weight instead of resenting the heaviness. That kind of asking is rare. It's the voice of the ones who want to be transformed, not just delivered. You saw the ache as an invitation, not a punishment. And that maturity pulled me near. I was already with you, but your request for wisdom made space for even more of me to be revealed. You didn't pretend to understand what was happening. You just surrendered to be shaped by it. You allowed me to stretch your perspective, deepen your compassion, increase your dependence. You didn't numb the pain. You named it, and then handed it to me. The trust, to give me your unfiltered questions without trying to hide your trembling, became a holy fragrance. You asked to grow, not to escape. You asked to see me, not to be spared. And I answered you in layers, not all at once, but piece by piece, day by day, whisper by whisper. I sent you insight wrapped in silence, peace laced through sorrow, revelation buried in hardship. And you kept digging. You didn't stop asking. You refused to be hardened. That pursuit, even in your lowest hours, proved you were ready for what pain was unlocking. Child, the ones who cry teach me instead of take it are the ones I trust with weight. You didn't need the suffering to end to stay faithful. You needed my voice, and you tuned your ear until it pierced through the noise. You didn't curse the discomfort. You cultivated fruit from it. They watched you search for the lesson while others were searching for the exit. You didn't build a case against me, you built an altar within me. And that altar is still burning. You will never be the same because you didn't resist the stretching. You didn't silence the ache by ignoring it. You surrendered it, asking me to make it something sacred. And now, because of that request, you will carry understanding that cannot be learned through ease. You will discern what others miss, speak what others cannot interpret, comfort those no one else sees. Because pain taught you how to hear me more clearly. Your capacity to carry glory was expanded by your willingness to walk through what was uncomfortable without abandoning your desire to learn. I am multiplying grace over you now, not just for endurance, but for revelation. Because you held in my hand even when it was breaking what was familiar. What I'm pouring into you now is directly connected to that moment when you asked for insight instead of insulation. You didn't beg me to remove the fire. You begged me to help you burn rightly in it. And now I'm answering with wisdom, with clarity, with depth. You will speak with authority not because you've avoided hardship, but because you met me inside of it and chose to be shaped by the experience rather than embittered by the season. This isn't because I forgot you. It's because I've been forming you. While some around you appeared to progress effortlessly, receiving breakthroughs without struggle, you were walking uphill with weights few ever saw. It wasn't because you lacked favor. It's because you were chosen for something heavier. I didn't place you in the line of convenience. I placed you in the furnace of refinement. Because what I've assigned to your life requires a foundation that can't be shaken by applause or criticism, by success or scarcity. I wasn't being unfair, I was being intentional. Others were handed answers, but I gave you questions, not to confuse you, but to develop your strength through seeking. I allowed resistance not to punish, but to sharpen. I withheld certain victories, not forever, but until the strength and you could carry them without compromise. You've been asking why the load felt so personal, why the road was narrow, why the answers took longer, and now I'm revealing it. Your preparation had to match your purpose. You are not being built for common use. You are being forged for specific, strategic, and eternal impact. That's why shortcuts didn't work for you. That's why doors others walked through stayed closed to you. That's why comfort never lasted. Because I wasn't raising you to be comfortable. I was building you to be unshakable. Every delay, every detour, every disappointment, they were permitted to thicken your endurance, not diminish your promise. I knew what you'd need on the other side of this journey. I knew what I was placing in your hands would be too weighty for a soul that hadn't been strengthened in obscurity. You haven't been walking in circles, you've been gaining capacity. The trials weren't aimless. They were architectural. I've been constructing a spirit that doesn't bend under pressure, doesn't cave under spotlight, doesn't fold under expectation. I've been pouring into you a resilience that can only be taught through storms that won't stop with one prayer. I didn't give you ease. I gave you endurance. Because ease cannot hold glory. And child, you're being prepared to carry something holy. This is why comparison has no place in your journey. What others were released into early, you were called to steward later, but with weight they will never comprehend. You haven't been left behind. You've been leveled up in ways no one else could see. Their elevation came quickly, but yours will come with foundation. And what comes with depth cannot be destroyed by shallow winds. You didn't take the fast route, but you're about to enter rooms built to last. You didn't skip steps, and now you will walk with the kind of authority that cannot be imitated. I gave you endurance because what you carry will serve generations, not just moments. And now, the time has come where the pressure begins to make sense. You will look back on what once broke you and realize it was strengthening your roots. You will step into places others only dreamed of, not because you chased opportunity, but because you embraced the preparation when no one clapped, when no one understood, when even you questioned the process. You said yes when the only thing offered in return was another test. You kept going when no one else knew how much you carried. And now I will reward not only your obedience, but your endurance. I am releasing a strength that doesn't just sustain, it elevates. I am confirming your identity not through the voice of man but through the weight of what you're about to walk in. So hold steady, beloved. The very thing you thought disqualified you, the long road, the unseen tears, the delayed breakthroughs, have marked you as one I can trust with glory. You're not behind. You're ready. Because the ones I assign great weight to must first learn to carry it in the silence without dropping it, and you never did. The pull to walk away was loud. The desire to escape the tension, to abandon the uncertainty, to reach for something simpler. It echoed through every fiber of your being. You watched others take exits you could have justified. You felt the weight of delay press hard against your expectations. And still, you didn't move until I released you. You didn't bow to the urge to control the timeline. You resisted the pressure to run ahead and make your own way. That resistance wasn't weakness, it was wisdom birthed from trust. I saw how many times you had the opportunity to take matters into your own hands. I watched as your mind tried to build alternatives, but your spirit stayed anchored in what I originally said. That loyalty wasn't accidental, it was warfare. Remaining still in the middle of agitation takes strength most never develop. You didn't ask for shortcuts. You asked for my voice. You didn't demand early access. You waited for the appointed moment. And while the world around you appeared to surge forward, you remained tethered to my whisper. You knew better than to mistake movement for progress. You knew that momentum without direction is a dangerous thing. So you waited. Not passively but prayerfully. Not with bitterness but with expectation. You grew while waiting. You listened while resting. You refined your focus when others diluted theirs, chasing opportunities I never assigned them. And now the divine unfolding is being activated. Not because you fought for it, but because you refused to fight against me. You weren't just standing still, you were being prepared. The holding pattern wasn't punishment. It was preservation. It was alignment. It was me safeguarding what would have been ruined if accessed too soon. Your decision to stay planted is what made you ready to carry what I'm about to release. Others will ask how things shifted so suddenly in your life, but it won't be sudden. It will be the release of what's been growing beneath the surface for longer than they ever knew. This moment was made possible by every time you did quit. By every day you didn't let your emotions dictate your direction. By every night you chose to believe that I was still working, even in silence. Your obedience has made room for divine unlocking. The doors opening now were not forced, they are responding to maturity. You didn't just pass the test of faith, you excelled in the test of patience. And patience, when it has completed its work, positions you for fullness. The fullness of what I've been orchestrating. The fullness of destiny you nearly forfeited when it seemed like I was moving too slow. But you stayed. You endured the stillness. You allowed me to lead, even when my steps weren't visible. And because of that, I am honoring you with acceleration that doesn't skip the process. It honors it. The lift coming to your life is not man-made. It's not temporary. It's not shallow. It's weighty, precise, and permanent. The kind that rests upon those who know what it means to wait without compromising, to serve without recognition, to walk without full visibility. You are stepping into rare air, the realm reserved for those who choose me over movement. What's coming is not just an answer. It's an assignment. A divine deployment that aligns perfectly with what I've been shaping inside of you during the waiting. So don't regret the season of stillness. It was sacred. It formed the vessel that can now hold what's next. And while others are exhausted from chasing what never belonged to them, you will walk with strength, clarity, and peace into what was designed with your name etched into its foundation. Because you stayed, child, heaven is moving. There were moments no one witnessed, moments when bitterness could have taken root so easily, yet you turned away from vengeance and chose the path of release. You carried wounds inflicted by careless words, betrayal wrapped in familiarity, and silence where affirmation should have been. You could have buried that pain under layers of indifference, but instead, you laid it at my feet and whispered, "I don't want to carry this anymore." You didn't excuse the wrong. You exhaled it. You didn't ignore the damage. You surrendered your right to repay it. And that surrender sent ripples through the unseen realm. Forgiveness is not weakness. Forgiveness is spiritual warfare. And you waged it with quiet strength, disarming the schemes of the accuser who longed to use offense as a gateway to bind you. But you broke that cycle. You said no to the bitterness that was offering you counterfeit power. You declined the invitation to rehearse the offense in your heart. Instead, you invited me to occupy the space where pain once echoed. You didn't wait for apologies to flow, you forgave without a transaction. That purity of heart made heaven move on your behalf. I recorded that choice. I measured the cost. I felt the tension in your chest as you released names you once wept over. That release was not weakness. It was authority. In letting go, you made room for something greater. Your heart expanded in capacity. Your spirit elevated in power. You unhooked yourself from cycles others are still trapped in. And now, I am responding, not only by healing your wounds but by using them. The very area where offense tried to take root will now become the soil where compassion grows. You will speak with clarity not birthed from theory but from transformation. Because you didn't just forgive with words, you forgave with posture. That posture has marked your future with unexpected favor. There are things I am unlocking because of what you released. You thought forgiveness was private, but it created ripple effects beyond what you can imagine. You opened the door for generational healing. You severed patterns that plagued your bloodline. You shattered narratives that said, "Hold on to pain to feel powerful." And now I am writing a new chapter over your name, one that reflects mercy, not retaliation. You were right to feel hurt. You were right to feel disappointed. But you chose to rise above what you had every reason to hold on to. And that choice is not ordinary. It is supernatural. That's why I am elevating you in ways that others will not understand. They'll look for what you did externally, but the key was hidden in what you let go of internally. I promote those who carry clean hands and pure hearts, and yours have been tested by fire. You didn't weaponize your wounds, you turned them into worship. You didn't rehearse your trauma, you invited me to repurpose it. That's why I can trust you with greater reach. Because the grace I place on your life won't be filtered through bitterness. It will flow from a heart that chose wholeness. And now I will cause even your enemies to witness what I do for those who forgive. I am not done with the ones who hurt you. I am still writing their story. But your healing will not wait for their apology. I have already begun restoring what offense tried to erode. And I will continue to multiply peace in every space you refuse to let resentment rule. The harvest coming is directly connected to the mercy you gave. You passed the test that many fail, the test of forgiving before understanding. And now, I am filling the places where grief once grew with rivers of joy, revelation, and release. Because you forgave, not with clenched fists but with open hands, I will place treasures there, blessings not bought, favor not fabricated. Watch what I do next. You've made room for it by forgiving what could have poisoned your path. And that decision is rewriting what happens next. When it felt like the clock kept ticking and the doors remained still, you didn't try to force your way through. While others scrambled to create outcomes, you stepped back and placed your schedule in my hands. You didn't allow anxiety to become your compass. You silenced the noise and chose to believe that I wasn't late, I was precise. Every ticking moment felt longer than the last, but you still waited with reverence, not resentment. That waiting posture became a testimony in the spirit. You weren't idle, you were aligned. You didn't allow impatience to push you into unauthorized action. You trusted that I see further than you, deeper than you, beyond your present moment. The stillness wasn't inactivity. It was incubation. While nothing seemed to shift on the surface, I was rearranging pieces behind the veil. And you didn't interrupt that process with your own agenda. You didn't turn to shortcuts. You didn't try to script the ending I was writing in real time. You simply said, "Have your way, Lord," and meant it. That surrender kept you in the center of my movement, even when it looked like nothing was happening. Many talk about trusting me, but few trust me with time. You did. You gave me your calendar, your hopes, your benchmarks, and you didn't snatch them back when you felt the ache of waiting. You stayed low. You stayed listening. You stayed available. That faith, quiet and undemanding, reached realms more than declarations ever could. Because you weren't just speaking belief, you were living it by not trying to alter my divine pace. Delay didn't disappoint you, it deepened you. You saw every pause as protection. You saw every closed door as a redirection. You didn't panic. You planted. You didn't run. You did. And now, I am responding to the faith that didn't need fast results to remain active. Because you believed I was at work when your prayers had no timestamp, I am ushering you into moments that only appear when obedience has been sustained. You didn't ask me to catch up with your plan. You asked me to take the lead, even if that meant walking slower than you hoped. And now I am matching that obedience with divine timing so exact. It will silence every question you once carried in the midnight hours. My child, this wasn't delay. It was alignment. I've been preparing the place while preparing you. I didn't want to send you too early and have the promise break under premature pressure. I held things back until your character could carry the weight. And you never cursed the weight. You turned it into worship. As we make this moment holy. What's coming to you now is not rushed, and it won't be reversed. It is timely, tested, and tailored to the soul that trusted when no clock confirmed it. You let go of your need for immediate answers so I could give you lasting outcomes. Others may have laughed, questioned, moved ahead, but you stayed where I placed you. And now the fullness of time is meeting the fullness of surrender. You're about to walk into what couldn't have happened one day sooner, not because you weren't ready to receive, but because the environment wasn't ready to hold you. I didn't want to bless you with something incomplete. I wanted you to enter the room when the table was already set. And now, it is. Your reward is not just in what's arriving, it's in the purity of how you waited. You never tried to twist my hand. You never built your own ladder. You let me unfold the design in my timing. And now I'm opening doors that don't just match your dream. They match your pace, your depth, your calling. They fit the shape of the soul that learned to breathe through the weight. You're not behind. You're exactly where I placed you. And now, everything that waited on your trust is stepping forward in time with heaven's clock. No crowd cheered for you in the shadows. No audience applauded the sacrifices made in silence. But I saw it all. I watched as you stood when everyone else sat down. You didn't wait for others to validate your convictions. You walked them out when the road felt endless and the atmosphere echoed with solitude. It was never about isolation. It was about identification. You weren't being punished. You were being marked. I separated you, not to harm you, but to heal you from the approval addiction that enslaves so many. I needed you to know what it's like to believe without consensus, to stand without applause, to hope when it feels like you're the only one still hoping. You weren't abandoned. You were entrusted. Entrusted with silence, entrusted with solitude, and trust it with seasons where your obedience did come with a following. It didn't make you bitter. It made you deeper. The absence of affirmation became the soil for your roots. You stopped looking sideways to find belonging and started looking upward to find assignment. That's where your clarity was born. When friends faded, when support dried up, when voices stopped echoing your faith, you stayed steady. You didn't crumble. You didn't compromise just to feel included. You didn't downgrade your standard just to avoid feeling overlooked. You chose me over the need to be seen. You chose truth over trend. You stood with integrity while others shifted to fit the moment. And now, that stance, taken without witnesses, has carried weight in the spiritual realm. You don't realize it yet, but you've become a pillar. You've become a signal. Not because you were loud, but because you were consistent. You followed me in the quiet hours. You clung to me when the silence felt heavier than the trials. You kept praying even when no one else reminded you to. You kept moving forward even when no one else walked beside you. I didn't leave you in that wilderness. I walked with you, whispering strength into your soul while others assumed you were finished. The wilderness didn't disqualify you. It proved what could not be shaken. You didn't require a crowd to be faithful. That's why I'm lifting you now. Not onto a stage, but into a new space of spiritual responsibility. You can be trusted with influence because you didn't chase it. You can lead others because you've learned how to stand alone. This elevation isn't reward, it's recognition. It's the unveiling of what's been growing when no one was watching. The strength you now carry was forged in those lonely seasons. The discernment you now hold was sharpened when noise was stripped away. I'm not sending you back into the crowd to blend in. I'm sending you as a light, because you know how to burn even when no one fuels your flame. I hid you for a reason. I kept you low for a purpose. I let you be overlooked so I could overflow you without distraction. What you've gained in the quiet will now overflow in the open. But you won't be moved by the spotlight, because you were faithful without one. You won't lose yourself in visibility, because you found yourself in obscurity. You've been tested by silence. You've been refined through solitude. And now I'm calling you into influence that won't dilute what I've built in you. Your voice is needed. Not to impress, but to impact. Not to echo others, but to release what I've personally poured into you. Many will wonder where you came from, but you, and I will know, you were raised in the unseen, where faith flourished without feedback, and obedience didn't wait for recognition. I'm honoring what you built in secret by expanding your borders. You proved that intimacy with me is enough, and now, everything that flows from you will reflect the authenticity that only grows in hidden places. You're ready, not because of applause, but because of alignment. You weren't buried. You were planted. Others passed you by, thinking you were dormant, unaware that I had hidden you for refinement, not rejection. I didn't allow them to recognize your value too soon, because if exposure came before maturity, the very spotlight meant to display your purpose could have destroyed what I was growing in you. You wondered why so many looked past you, why your presence felt unseen even when your heart was fully engaged. But that obscurity wasn't punishment, it was protection. I was guarding your formation. I was preserving the oil. Not everything sacred is meant to be showcased too soon. You weren't overlooked. You were reserved. Set apart. Covered by my timing. Sheltered under the weight of my preparation. Because what I've deposited within you can't be handled casually or consumed prematurely. The world rewards visibility, but I cultivate legacy in the hidden place. And I was never preparing you for popularity. I was shaping you for purpose. You didn't beg to be noticed. You didn't chase validation to feel significant. You remained rooted, allowing me to work beneath the surface, even when it felt like everyone else was being seen, celebrated, and accelerated. But you didn't compromise your calling to compete. You allowed me to define your rhythm. That yielded spirit became the very environment in which your roots grew deep and your discernment sharpened. You knew in your spirit that you were born for more, but you refused to rush the becoming. And because of that, your elevation will not be temporary. It will not be flimsy. It will not be unstable. Because what I'm unveiling was not built on noise, it was built on substance. The invisibility was never about denying your destiny. It was about preparing the space within you to hold it. You had to be developed where no one else could interrupt the process. I didn't allow everyone access to your becoming, because not all hands are clean enough to touch what I'm refining. There are dimensions of glory that only grow when shielded from human interference. And I've kept you there, wrapped in grace, hidden from premature praise, guarded from distractions, because I saw what was ahead long before you felt the delay. You were never forgotten. I kept my eyes on you every step of the journey. I watched as you stayed faithful with little. I listened to the prayers you whispered when no one was watching. You never stopped seeking me, even when it seemed like no fruit was visible. But I was watching the root, the hidden part, the unseen structure. That's what I care about, because if the root is strong, the fruit will last. And yours is about to emerge. Now the hour has come where what I've hidden will begin to shine. But you won't shine like the world expects. You'll carry a quiet authority, a weight that doesn't need performance, a peace that doesn't need noise. You will be known not for how loud you are, but for how deeply you've allowed me to dwell within you. The unveiling isn't for your ego, it's for my glory. What you've carried in silence will now echo in rooms where your name was never mentioned before. And they won't understand how or why you arrived in, but you'll know. You'll know it was the years in hiddenness, the days in surrender, the hours in secret places that brought this moment into being. I'm calling forth what's been maturing in my presence. I'm lifting the veil, not to impress the world, but to reveal what I've authored without their permission. And you will walk with clarity, because you didn't fight to be seen, you fought to stay aligned. You will move with confidence, because you didn't trade depth for visibility. You are not rising out of ambition, you are emerging out of intimacy. What's unfolding now isn't a result of striving, it's the reward of waiting. And because you trusted me to hide you, I can now trust you to carry what others cannot. So rise, not with pride, but with gratitude. For what was hidden is now ready to be revealed. You could have defended yourself. You had every fact, every wound, every reason to speak. The injustice was real, the misunderstanding sharp, the silence from others deafening. But instead of building a case, you built an altar. You laid your right to be right before me and trusted that I saw everything you chose not to say. The moment wasn't weakness, it was war in the spirit. You silenced an argument, but your silence roared in the heavenly realm. The world around you says fight louder, prove harder, never back down, but you followed a higher law, a deeper command. Blessed are the peacemakers. And in that moment, you became one. You didn't prove your value. You remembered who gave it to you. You didn't compete for validation. You walked away carrying peace. A decision cut through chains others couldn't even see. It broke cycles of retaliation. It interrupted generational patterns of needing to explain, justify, defend. You refused to let pride hijack your destiny. And because you chose stillness, I'm surrounding you with something greater than vindication. I'm surrounding you with my covering. What you did wasn't passive. It was prophetic. You silenced voices that demanded reaction. You didn't take the bait. You stood still and let me speak louder than any defense ever could. Child, I know how difficult it was. To hold your tongue while your heart felt misunderstood. To lower your voice when your name was being twisted. But that humility carried authority. And self-control became a key. You could have taken control, but instead, you gave me room to take over. And I did. I stepped into the space your silence created, and I began fighting battles your words would have only escalated. This is the level of spiritual strength few ever access, the ability to be calm when provoked, to choose clarity over chaos, to carry peace when war was expected. That's what breaks strongholds. That's what pulls down spiritual walls. I saw how you walked away, not in defeat, but in dignity. You didn't let offense find a seat in your soul. You didn't let the need to be heard outweigh the need to be whole. And now I'm rewarding that restraint with revelation. You're about to see things others miss, not because you shouted the loudest, but because you remain the most yielded. I whisper to those who aren't distracted by the noise of needing to be understood by people. You gave me your need for justice, and now I'm giving you supernatural clarity. You will speak again, but not in defense. You'll speak in power. You'll speak when I place words in your mouth that come with weight, not wounds. And the room will listen, not because you demanded it, but because I've endorsed it. You didn't force your moment, and that's why what's coming will carry permanence. A wisdom you gained in that quiet battle has shaped how you will lead. You'll be able to guide others through storms without adding to the wind. You'll know how to carry others' pain without letting it poison your peace. Don't regret what you didn't say. Don't revisit the silence wondering if you missed your chance to correct the narrative. I was in that silence. I used it to elevate you above the drama. I used it to build something stronger than a reputation. I used it to build unshakable peace. What I am giving you now is better than being right. It's being rooted. And that kind of peace cannot be stolen, mimicked, or faked. Because you chose to let me vindicate instead of validating yourself, I'm writing your story with a clarity no lie can undo. I'm inviting you into realms where peace becomes your platform, not performance. You didn't win the argument. You won access to something eternal. Now walk boldly, not because you shouted, but because you stayed surrendered. When the answers didn't come and the noise around you faded, you didn't fill the quiet with doubt. You didn't allow despair to dominate the atmosphere. Instead, you made the silence a sanctuary. While others grew restless, you grew reverent. While time felt slow and heavy, you turned it into a song. You didn't wait for the atmosphere to shift. You became the shift. You tuned your ears not to what was absent, but to the subtle echo of my presence. And in that sacred hush, your praise grew louder than the pressure. You turned stillness into strength, not by forcing movement, but by worshiping while nothing moved. It was never just about waiting, it was about what you did while you waited. You didn't let the unknown pull you into fear. You let it push you into devotion. You stood at the door for so long, not knowing when it would open, not knowing how long you'd have to stand, but you never walked away. You chose to stay, not out of desperation, but out of trust. Others questioned why you hadn't given up yet. Others told you to move on, try something else, let go. But you remain. And you praised. And every note of that surrender saturated the silence with faith. I saw how you responded to the delays. Not with bitterness, but with brokenness. Not with complaints, but with consecration. You didn't sulk. You surrendered. You didn't grumble, you glorified. And heaven took notice. Your whispered songs in the hallway carried more power than the loudest praise on the mountaintop. You didn't need circumstances to change before lifting your voice. You lifted your voice because you believed I was still worthy, even when the answers seemed distant. That is the faith I honor. Not the kind that only sings after the victory, but the kind that dances when the ground feels uncertain and tomorrow hasn't spoken yet. Child, what you didn't know was this. The silence wasn't punishment, it was sacred. I wasn't ignoring you. I was inviting you deeper. I wasn't withholding answers, I was expanding your awareness. I wasn't delaying the door. I was preparing the weight of what waited behind it. And now, because you didn't stop praising, because you didn't step away from the hallway, I am swinging the door open before anyone expected. Others rushed ahead and missed the timing. You stayed behind, thinking you were forgotten, but you were right on time. This door was never going to respond to pressure. It responds only to praise. What you will now walk into isn't random. It's not the result of luck, striving, or positioning. It's the result of presence. Your willingness to remain in mine when nothing else made sense. What felt like delay was divine protection. What seemed like stagnation was preparation in disguise. You didn't see what I was setting up on the other side. You only saw the door. But I saw both sides. And I needed you to remain in the hallway until the atmosphere on the other side was ready to receive you. Now it is. The door is opening, and not quietly. It is opening in a way that will signal to others that praise is not wasted, that faithfulness in hidden seasons is not overlooked, that stillness in the spirit is not stagnation, it is strategy. You're stepping through into something that only opens for those who worshipped in the silence. Others will wonder how you got there. They'll search for the shortcuts, but there were none. Only praise, only patience, only presence. And now, as the door opens, walk through with reverence. Walk through knowing you didn't pry it open, you praised until it moved. And that kind of access carries authority. Not to boast, not to dominate, but to steward what I'm releasing through your surrender. The waiting room has become your launching pad because you never stopped singing. You didn't need thunder to trust me. You didn't wait for lightning to confirm my love. You believed me in the breeze. You heard me in the quiet nudge that others ignore. And that trust, that gentle leaning into my voice when everything external stayed unchanged, revealed the depth of your faith. You weren't looking for a performance, you were waiting for direction. Others hesitated until they saw proof, but you moved the moment I breathed a word. That kind of sensitivity cannot be taught. It's cultivated in intimacy. It's born in secret places where no one else walks, where no applause echoes, where it's just me and the one who believes without needing confirmation. You didn't ask for constant reassurance. You didn't test me to see if I'd prove myself again. You remembered what I'd already done, and that remembrance carried you. When questions pressed hard, when doubt tried to climb into your chest, you pushed it out by standing on what I already spoke. You rehearsed my promises instead of your fears. You quoted my truth instead of your timeline. You didn't manipulate me with desperation. You magnetized my presence through trust. You became one of the few who don't need the cloud to move before they follow. You listened to the stillness and said, "That's enough for me." I honor that kind of belief. I reward those who walk in shadows and still declare light. You didn't craft a backup plan. You didn't build a safety net in case I didn't come through. You dismantled every human solution and chose to stand on what I whispered when you were on your knees. That is why your journey has felt different. It's why your road has seemed slower. Because I was molding someone who could carry revelation, not just blessing. You weren't called to mimic, you were formed to discern. That formation cost you things. Friends who didn't understand. Opportunities that required compromise. Comfort you could have chosen. But you walked away for what was eternal in order to cling to what was eternal. You didn't flinch when I moved differently than expected. You didn't accuse me when things didn't look like the prophecy. You leaned in. You waited longer. You let me lead even when the direction wasn't linear. That kind of faith is not common. It's costly. But I've seen it. I've heard the way you talk to me when no one else hears. I've read the journal entries that begin with "I don't understand" and end with "but I still believe you." Those words shook more in the spirit than you know. Because trust like that isn't built overnight. It's built through fire and stillness and surrender. Others will wonder how you hear me so clearly. They'll ask where your insight comes from. They won't see the midnight prayers, the early morning stillness, the 1,000 moments you chose me over logic. But I saw everyone. I watched you believe when the report looked the opposite. I watched you speak peace when fear surrounded you. I watched you declare my goodness when nothing in the natural validated that statement. And now I'm about to showcase what kind of fruit grows from that kind of root. This next chapter isn't just about favor. It's about authority. Because when I can trust someone to move by whisper, I can release revelation others are not prepared to handle. You didn't demand signs because you carried discernment. You didn't need flashing lights because you held divine memory. And now, I am about to make known what I've poured into you in secret. Not to glorify you, but to glorify what faith built without evidence. You are one of the rare ones. The kind who knows the shepherd's voice in the dark. The kind who keeps walking when the map is missing. The kind who says, "If you said it, I'll believe it, even if it takes a lifetime to see it." And now, beloved, I'm turning what you believe into what you behold. The ones who believe me at my whisper are the ones who will now carry my thunder. You weren't chasing escape. You were craving encounter. You didn't seek the path of least resistance. You searched for the place where my nearness would become your strength. When the ache grew heavy and the surroundings grew dim, you didn't beg for the pressure to end. You whispered, "Just don't leave me, Lord." And that cry didn't fall flat. It surged like a wave through the courts of heaven. Because while others were asking for release from their burdens, you asked for deeper communion within them. That kind of request is rare. That kind of hunger reshapes destinies. You weren't content with temporary relief. You were after something eternal. Intimacy that can't be broken by outcomes or timelines. You didn't measure my presence by blessings. You measured it by how your heart burned in the middle of your waiting. That longing, for me, not just for answers, has become the very ground upon which I will build the next move in your life. You made room for me, not through performance but through pursuit. And I entered, not with noise but with weight. My glory does not fall where it is not desire. But you, beloved, didn't just want help. You wanted me. I saw you in your stillness, not praying for the storm to disappear, but for your soul to be anchored through it. I heard your voice in the quiet, whispering, "If you're here, I can walk through anything." And those words were more powerful than any petition for comfort could ever be. Because you didn't idolize ease, you sought connection. You didn't worship what I could do, you fell in love with who I am. That distinction is why the winds are shifting now. I'm responding to desire, not demand. I'm responding to the heart that hosts me, not the one that merely seeks solutions. You weren't chasing perfection. You just wanted to be near me, no matter the cost. That's why I allowed the detours. That's why I permitted the delays. They were never about punishment. They were about proximity. They made you lean, listen, linger. They exposed the places where dependence hadn't yet been rooted. And you let me touch them. You invited me into the fragile places and said, "Teach me to trust you here." You didn't wait to feel strong, you invited me into the weakness. You weren't too proud to say, "I need you more than I need this situation to change." Because of that posture, things are now being rearranged. Not just externally, but within. The atmosphere around your name is shifting because the hunger within your spirit has reached a point of overflow. You're not just a receiver anymore, you've become a carrier. You've turned your requests into communion. And now I will turn your intimacy into influence. Not for your name to be lifted, but for mine to be made visible through your obedience. You asked for me, not my gifts. You crave my face, not just my hand. And now I will reveal both. You didn't run from the tension. You stayed in the pressure so my presence could shape you in ways ease never could. You surrendered comfort on the altar of closeness, and I received it like a fragrant offering. That's why the release now carries a weight of glory that many will not comprehend. It won't just feel like breakthrough. It will feel like home. Because what's coming next doesn't simply fix what's broken. It reveals what was hidden. Me. My heart. My power. My companionship. You will walk not as one trying to survive, but as one overflowing with the reality of my nearness. The ones who asked for comfort will receive a moment. The ones who ask for closeness will receive me, and everything that comes with me. You chose wisely, child. And because of that, I am now stepping in not as a visitor, but as the center. Prepare to see what happens when a life builds itself around my presence. The cry for closeness had been answered. Now watch how I draw near. You saw people who once stood beside you take leaps while you stood in place. Promotions arrived for them. Recognition came for them. New chapters opened for them while your pages remained blank. But even in that quiet space, you didn't resent their acceleration. You didn't ask me why they moved ahead. You asked me how to remain faithful while you were called to wait. The humility did not go unnoticed. I watched how you celebrated others when you were still waiting for your own doors. You rejoiced through tears. You clapped through tension. You honored their harvest while still plowing your own unyielding ground. And that posture, that refusal to let envy grow roots, made the heavens pause and listen. You never demanded that I speed up. You didn't give me ultimatums. You simply whispered, "Give me strength to stand here longer if this is where you've placed me." That prayer, born from trust, not urgency, was like incense to my throne. You weren't counting steps. You were trusting my stride. And every time you felt forgotten, you turned it into another invitation for my presence. You didn't race ahead to force your own door open. You waited, not passively but with reverence. You knew delay doesn't equal denial. You understood that your journey wasn't designed to mimic anyone else's. It was handcrafted to prepare you for something weightier than momentary wins. Others may not have seen your discipline. They may never understand how hard it was to remain loyal when life felt still. But I saw you all. I watched how you chose to fasten your heart to my voice even when I didn't give you all the answers. I saw how you honored my timing even when it stripped away your comfort. I saw you stay planted while others seemed to soar, not because you couldn't move, but because you refused to take one step ahead of me. But restraint wasn't weakness. It was worship. Your stillness has been a seed. And now the time has come for its fruit to burst forth. Not because you finally pushed hard enough, but because you waited long enough. You gave me time to complete what needed to be matured beneath the surface. While others sprinted, I was stretching your roots. While they gathered attention, I was giving you understanding. I wasn't holding you back, I was holding you together. And now, the quiet endurance you developed is about to release something unstoppable. Because what I'm giving you wasn't created in a rush. It was carved slowly, precisely, intentionally. Every ounce of what you waited for will carry permanence, not pressure. You never asked me for shortcuts, you asked me for strength. And now I'm granting more than strength. I'm releasing speed governed by wisdom. Acceleration birthed in the secret place. You won't just catch up. You will walk into things others miss because they ran past their moment. You did. You stayed. And because you stayed, what you're stepping into is not shallow. It's sacred. It will not waver. It will not wear you out. Because it fits the version of you that waiting has produced. Others chase milestones. You embrace my molding. And now, while many are resetting from burnout, you'll be rising with endurance. The endurance you built through every not yet, through every unseen breakthrough, through every long season where it felt like nothing was changing but everything inside you was being transformed. That's the part they won't see, but I saw it. I watched how the soil of surrender reshaped your character, how the discipline of stillness rewired your vision. So now, child, don't look around to compare. Look up, for the release is near. You didn't lag behind. You were in divine formation. You weren't late. You were being preserved. And now, the path in front of you is about to burst open, not because you chased it, but because you waited for me to walk it with you. Your race wasn't your fallback. It was your fuel. And now, grace will also be your gateway. The night didn't scare you. The silence didn't paralyze you. You felt the weight of shadows press against your chest, but you didn't let fear be louder than faith. You didn't wait for the sun to rise before choosing hope. You didn't retreat when the unknown crept close. You leaned in with your lamp trimmed and burning. I saw you clutch the flicker you had and refuse to let it die, even when winds tried to snuff it out. You weren't loud. You weren't flashy. But you were faithful. And that light, though small in the world's eyes, pierced through realms that only those with clean hearts can reach. You didn't wait for external conditions to change before deciding to shine. You illuminated your surroundings, one step at a time. You prayed when the sky stayed black. You believed when nothing confirmed your belief. That kind of faith isn't born in crowds, it's cultivated in caves. I saw how you refused to blend into the darkness. You didn't let hopelessness disguise itself as logic. You didn't hand over your light just to feel safe in the dark. You stood with what little you had and said, "If this is all I've got, I'll still shine it." And now, I'm breathing on that ember. Not because you asked me to make you visible, but because you did extinguish what I gave you. You carried that glow when no one noticed. You protected it when others mocked your effort. You believed it mattered, even when it felt insignificant. And because you honored the light I entrusted to you in obscurity, I will now increase it in the open. This isn't promotion for the sake of attention. This is expansion birthed from obedience. You didn't compromise in the night season. You didn't let the coldness of circumstance convince you that your warmth was wasted. You kept worshiping. You kept interceding. You stayed steady in the shadows, not knowing when dawn would break. But I saw every flicker, every whisper, every quiet act of perseverance. The world may have called it small, I called it sacred. Now I will magnify what you never tried to market. The light I'm about to place upon you isn't artificial, it's weighty, authentic, and unstoppable. It's not coming from external sources. It's rising from within. It's emerging from the flame that refused to die. And the brightness about to shine through your life will not just illuminate your path, it will guide others out of their night, too. Because those who remain faithful in the dark are the ones I can trust to carry glory in the light. I'm not just making you seen, I'm making you impactful. I'm not just enlarging your presence, I'm increasing your reach. And it won't come from striving. It won't be born of ambition. It will be the natural result of the consistency you built when no one was watching. That discipline, that surrender, that secret fire, it has created an atmosphere around you that now attracts divine opportunity. The right people, the right alignments, the right moments, they are now converging, not because you chased them, but because your light drew them. I didn't forget what you carried through the night. I didn't ignore the quiet sacrifices. I saw how you offered praise instead of panic. I saw how you led yourself in worship when no one else was singing. You proved that your radiance wasn't for attention, it was your offering. And that's why this new season won't break you. Because the light about to rest on you isn't fragile, it's fire-tested. To prepare, not for a spotlight, but for supernatural clarity. Not for applause, but for divine positioning. You will not glow, you will blaze. You will not entertain, you will transform. And every dark place you walk into will have to respond. Because I am amplifying what you carried through the longest hours. And what once was a flicker is about to become a flame the world cannot ignore. There are generations hidden in your footsteps, souls who haven't yet risen, but will, because you did. You thought the battle was only about your breakthrough, but I was using your endurance to carve out a path for others who wouldn't survive if you had quit. You weren't just pressing through for personal victory, you were blazing a trail in the spirit for those whose faith is still forming. Your yes wasn't isolated. It was generational. Every time you chose to keep going, even when your legs were trembling, you were planting seeds that would become lifelines for those who come after you. You didn't see it, but they're watching. Even in your quietest moments, even in your tears, even in your silent worship. Your perseverance has become permission for others to believe they can make it too. You may feel hidden, but your life is prophesying louder than words. Your choices, the ones you made when no one else clapped, when no one else stayed, when no one else saw, are shaping unseen futures. I allowed your process to stretch beyond personal fulfillment because I knew you were capable of carrying more than your own dreams. I trusted you with legacy. You didn't just pass a test, you paved a road. Others will walk smoother because you climbed first. They'll rise faster because you knelt longer. You laid down your pride. You swallowed your questions. You stayed close to me, not because you understood, but because you were willing. And now, every tear you sowed, every step you took through confusion, every whisper you offered in the dark. I am using it all as building material for others who will rise in your wake. You didn't even realize it, but you were becoming a bridge. One that connects broken hearts to hope. One that carries the weary across the waters of doubt. One that proves staying is possible, even when running looks easier. I didn't call you to be perfect. I called you to be consistent. And you were. When the pressure surged, you leaned into me. When you could have chosen offense, you offered obedience. You weren't always sure of the path, but you were certain of the one leading you. That certainty created a ripple effect that will echo long after this moment. You broke curses without even realizing it. You dismantled lies that ran through your bloodline. You challenged systems with your silence. And all the while, you thought you were just surviving. But I was using your survival to write a new blueprint. Now the time has come for the fruit to emerge. Not just in your life, but in the ones whose names you never heard, whose faces you may never meet. They will rise because you refused to settle. They will conquer because you learned how to crawl when walking felt impossible. You became a map when you kept moving through the maze. And I will honor that sacrifice, not just with reward, but with legacy. What you have built through your obedience will not vanish when the moment passes. It will multiply. It will expand. It will outlive every storm you thought would drown you. The ones who come after you won't need to guess. They'll trace your steps. They'll find the markers of someone who didn't fold, someone who didn't fake, someone who fell but rose again and again and again. And in that rising, they will find hope. You didn't preach it. You lived it. You didn't demand to be followed. You simply walked with me when it cost you everything. That is what I'm blessing now. That is what I'm multiplying. That is what I'm writing into the story. Not just your name, but the legacy attached to your name. You passed because you endured. But what I'm about to do through you goes far beyond survival. It touches inheritance. It touches nations. It touches generations not yet born. Because of your faithfulness, doors they didn't know existed will swing wide. Because of your loyalty, roads they feared were too steep will now feel possible. You passed, child, and what you carried is now becoming the foundation others will stand on. I never needed you to perform. I needed to see what you would choose when no one was watching, when no outcome was guaranteed, and when no audience surrounded you. Your greatest victory didn't come in what you accomplished. It came in what you endured without broadcasting your pain. You didn't wear your sorrow as a badge. You didn't shout about your hardship to gain sympathy. Instead, you bowed your heart in reverence and whispered my name when the ache pressed in too close. You carried yourself with quiet resolve, not because you were without wounds, but because you entrusted every bruise to me. Your silence wasn't weakness, it was worship. When the pressure mounted and the prayers seemed unanswered, you could have shouted accusations or withdrawn into bitterness. But instead, you laid low, letting your tears become your intercession. You didn't understand everything I was doing, yet you didn't accuse me. You waited. You trusted. You stayed. And in those moments, you were passing tests that can't be measured by human metrics. I wasn't looking at what you built on the outside. I was watching the resilience taking root on the inside. I was listening for your heart, not your explanation. You didn't know it, but each time you resisted the urge to explain your pain to people who wouldn't understand, heaven leaned closer. You didn't retaliate when they misunderstood you. You didn't defend yourself when they misjudged your process. Instead, you allowed me to become your defender. You chose stillness over spectacle. You chose devotion over distraction. And that silence spoke louder in the spirit than any defense you could have given with your mouth. I saw how you walked into rooms full of questions and held your peace like a shield. Not because you had no voice, but because you surrendered your right to be heard to protect the assignment I placed within you. Child, your response in the fire has unlocked things that effort never could. You remained kind when cruelty was easier. You chose to bless when betrayal stung. You kept your posture of humility even when others tried to provoke you. These are not minor details. These are monumental acts of obedience that shift atmospheres. I measured your silence not as absence, but as agreement with my will. You were saying with your stillness, "I trust you even now." And that declaration reverberated louder than 1,000 sermons. I was never after your production. I was after your positioning. I needed to see if you'd still stand when standing cost you. And you did. You passed when you sat in the sorrow but didn't let it sour your spirit. You passed when you wept, not in rebellion, but in reverence. You passed when you let go of the need to prove anything to anyone, and let me be the one to speak on your behalf in due time. Now I'm raising your voice in a different way, not to shout your pain, but to carry weight. Not to explain your wounds, but to release wisdom. What I'm about to pour through you will come not from what you said in strength, but from what you held in silence. Your restraint became your authority. Your quiet endurance is now your qualification. And I will amplify what you carried in secret, not for show, but for stewardship. Because the vessel that does not explode in the fire can be trusted to pour oil after the flame. Others may never understand how deeply you were tested. That's okay. They weren't supposed to see it. They were supposed to see me through you when you chose peace over panic. You let me mold your response. And now I will reward that discipline with revelation. Your words will carry more than knowledge. They will carry presence. Not because you've read more, but because you've endured more. And you did it without needing to be seen. That's why I'm elevating you, not for performance, but for purpose. You passed the test not through outcomes, but through response. And now, because you yielded to the hidden fire, you're stepping into the visible flame, not to be consumed, but to carry my glory without being shaken. You didn't need the evidence to hold on. You didn't require constant reassurance or visible signs to continue believing. When the vision was still hazy and the fulfillment looked distant, you chose to anchor yourself in what I said rather than what you saw. That posture separated you. You weren't following a trend. You were following a word. When others required miracles to stay motivated, you held my promise like it was already done. That kind of belief isn't common. It's built in the secret place, where my whisper is more real to you than the world's opinions. You walked with a limp, but never let go of what I gave you in prayer. You rehearsed my voice more than your fears. You didn't chase signs. You clung to sentences I spoke in moments no one else witnessed. And even when the silence grew long and the weight pressed against your understanding, you did not let go. I watched you choose to remain steady when it would have been easier to let the dream fade. I saw how you fought to remember, not because reminders surrounded you, but because your heart refused to forget. You could have shifted your expectations to avoid disappointment. You could have lowered the standard just to feel safe. But instead, you allowed the tension to stretch your trust. You said, even if it takes longer, I won't change what you said to match what I feel. That response reached further than your atmosphere. It reached into the eternal. It told the heavens that your heart wasn't anchored in outcome. It was anchored in obedience. And now, I'm responding not to your waiting, but to how you waited. Here's something different about the one who holds on to a promise that has no timeline. The one who builds their life around something that hasn't happened yet. That kind of faith rewrites legacies. It shifts bloodlines. It tells the darkness, you don't need to see the fruit to believe the seed is real. And that's exactly what you did. You protected the seed. You watered it with prayer. You kept it from being choked by impatience or poisoned by doubt. You didn't broadcast it for validation. You kept it in the soil of worship, letting me tend to what you couldn't explain. You're not just waiting anymore. You're ready. Ready to carry what has been hidden. Ready to walk in what's about to be revealed. The unveiling isn't just about fulfillment. It's about alignment. Your heart and the promise now beat in rhythm. And what's emerging isn't something new to you. It's something that's been alive within you all along. The world may call it a surprise, but for you, it will feel like recognition. You've seen it in your spirit so many times, The physical manifestation will only confirm what's already lived in your imagination. I'm about to show the world what faith looks like when it doesn't flinch. I'm about to reveal what happens when someone says yes to me without needing all the steps in advance. You passed through the fog with your hands still lifted. You crossed unknown roads with your heart still open. And that kind of journey doesn't end in survival. It ends in glory. You didn't wait with your arms folded. You waited with your spirit leaning. And now, the promise isn't just coming, it's arriving with acceleration. You didn't manipulate the timing. You didn't fabricate momentum. You didn't try to look powerful while feeling weary. You stayed honest, hopeful, and hungry. And now, I'm meeting your faith with fulfillment. Not rushed, not shallow, not forced, but perfectly timed, unshakable, undeniable, overflowing. Because only the ones who carry without proof can handle the weight of the unveiling. So lift your head. Not because you earned this, but because you endured it. The promise never left my hand. It was growing while you were waiting. It was taking shape while you were sowing. And now, it's stepping into your reality, not as a surprise, but as a confirmation that faith without sight still moves mountains. You didn't cling to me because of what I could do. You stayed because of who I am. You weren't drawn by the outcome, you were drawn by the intimacy. You didn't treat me like a transaction. You treated me like treasure. When others grew impatient and walked off when the miracle delayed, you pressed in, even if it meant receiving nothing but stillness. That longing, to know me above receiving from me, made you rare in a world hungry for answers but resistant to relationship. You didn't require breakthrough to believe. You didn't require provision to keep praying. You simply wanted me. You saw the emptiness and still called me good. You tasted the bitter and still blessed my name. You entered into my presence with no script, no demand, no list of expectations. You said, even if you do nothing more, you've already done enough. That heart posture tore through the veil. It bypassed performance and pierced through to the throne. Because I searched the earth not for the loudest voices, but for the quietest loyalties. The ones who stay when the silence stretches and the outcome is uncertain. You didn't ask me to prove my worth. You believed I was enough, even when I withheld what you hoped for. You were testing me. You were trusting me. And I built something inside you that only grows in the absence of visible reward. You became anchored, not in events, but in essence. In my essence. You found joy, not in what was delivered, but in what was revealed when you waited without expectations. That kind of faith doesn't fade. It matures. It becomes a wellspring of peace that doesn't dry up when outcomes delay. You weren't seeking the blessing. You were becoming the blessing. And now, I will pour through you what others tried to grab but weren't willing to grow into. Your devotion stripped away conditions. You didn't say, if you bless me, I'll follow. You said, even if you don't, I won't let go. You meant it. You lived it. And I recorded it. I measured every step taken in the absence of applause, every prayer whispered in the absence of results. And I counted it all as worship. You were giving me the gift I longed for, a heart that doesn't shift with the circumstances. You walked with me not because the path was smooth, but because my voice was near. So now, I'm pouring something deeper into you. Not just answers, but access. Not just fulfillment, but fullness. You're entering into a realm where I don't simply give to you. I move through you. Because you didn't use me, you welcomed me. You didn't manipulate. You minister. You didn't flee when the fire came. You asked me to sit with you in it. That's why you're stepping into a season others will not understand. They'll ask how you carry so much peace. They'll wonder how your life glows with purpose. They won't realize it was cultivated in the place where I gave you nothing but myself. And you said that was more than enough. You chose presence over prosperity. And now I'm giving you both, not as a bribe but as a reflection of trust. You proved I didn't have to perform to keep your love. You weren't after my hand. You pursued my heart. You didn't run when things stayed the same. You dug deeper. You let roots grow in barren soil. And now, child, the fruit is coming, and it won't rot. Because it's not the kind that depends on rain. It's the kind that was born in drought. This is what happens when you stay. When you seek me not for answers but for encounter. What you're about to walk into isn't repayment. It's relationship multiplied. I'm giving you more of me, and everything that comes with me. Because you stayed. Because you didn't walk away when I was all you had. Now watch what happens when I give you what only I can bring. Not just miracles, but my very presence in every step ahead. You never sought validation from the crowd. You weren't looking for applause to continue. When I placed that fragile seed in your spirit, you didn't expose it prematurely. You shielded it like a sacred trust. You didn't try to convince others of its worth. You simply nurtured it in silence. You didn't broadcast your assignment to gain approval. You didn't try to force fruit before its time. And because of that, I took notice. You honored what I whispered when it didn't yet resemble a miracle. You said yes when it was still invisible. You fought to protect what only you and I knew was growing. There were days when even you questioned its worth. There were moments when the burden of carrying something unseen felt like too much. But you never abandoned it. You never let the pressure cause you to leak the promise too soon. You knew it was holy. You knew it needed time. You cradled it in your prayers, not your pride. You carried it through disappointments and delays, through betrayal and blindness. Others couldn't see it, but I knew what you were hiding, not from fear, but from reverence. Because the greatest moves of heaven always begin in shadows before they ever shine in public. I watched how you refused to compromise the process for quick recognition. I saw how you denied yourself the temporary thrill of being seen to preserve the eternal weight of being chosen. That quiet discipline you walked in was not missed. You could have made noise to gain support. You could have manipulated moments to be noticed. But instead, you kept your head low and your heart high. You let me be your audience. You let the process mature you. You didn't shortcut the wilderness. You did escape to comfort. You stayed where I placed you, even when the silence was louder than the storm. I will now honor what you guarded. What you refused to expose prematurely, I will now reveal strategically. What you cultivated in intercession, I will establish with impact. What you carried through rejection, I will present with recognition, not from man, but from heaven itself. Because you didn't just protect a calling, you protected your purity while holding the calling. And that is a distinction not many make. You refused to let bitterness grow beside the seed. You didn't let ego pollute the promise. You kept the altar burning while everyone else chased stages. So now, child, I step in. Not just to bring you forward, but to preserve what you've built behind the scenes. No one saw the nights you wrestled with discouragement and still returned to prayer. No one heard the conversations where you defended what I gave you, even while battling inner questions. But I did. I recorded every yes. I documented every silent surrender. I counted every step taken in private that shaped who you are in public. And I say to you, nothing you built in obedience will be lost. Not a single sacrifice will go unaccounted for. I will breathe upon what you've protected, and it will rise in strength. You see, what is birthed in secrecy will be carried with stability. Because your foundation isn't popularity, it's presence. You didn't grow through hype, you were refined in holiness. You didn't build on influence, you built on intercession. And because of that, I will shield what you've stewarded. What comes next will not be easily shaken. You've proven that you can carry glory without leaking pride. You've shown me that you can rise in honor without forsaking humility. And because you've passed this test, I will now defend your name where others tried to destroy it. You don't need to fight to be seen. I am your vindicator. You don't have to announce your breakthrough. I am the one who announces what is mine. I will guard what's coming. I will cover what you've built. I will raise what you planted. And no storm will snatch it from your hands. Because you never took credit, I will now display my fingerprints across everything connected to you. And they'll know, not because you told them, but because I'll make it undeniable that you were mine all along. Amen.